Hey guys, how's it going? I'm Sydney from PhoneDog.com and welcome to PhoneDog's live podcast here on Ustream. Also on Facebook if you're watching us there, or if you're watching this on YouTube, if you're watching the recording of it. Welcome and thanks for watching. We have quite a show this week, as we do every week. And so, of course, as usual, I'll be following the chat on Ustream, even though you guys hardly ever stay on topic. But I'll also be checking out the comments for the video on YouTube. So if you are watching the recording of this, feel free to leave your comments on any of the topics that we talk about. And I check those out and I respond to some of them if you have any questions. But we're going to get started this week because we do have quite a bit to talk about. And so we're just going to get right into it. The first thing that I want to start off with, just because I feel it would be appropriate, I kind of feel obligated to, I do want to just say a few things about Steve Jobs dying, passing away. Of course, there's nothing that I could say to make it better or, to even offer my condolences to the family, since I doubt they watch this. But I just think it'd be nice to pay our respects, no matter how you feel about Apple or even about Steve Jobs himself. He was still a great person, a great CEO. He was a great businessman and also a great inventor. The products that Apple released while he was CEO changed a lot of things and had a massive impact on the market today. No matter how you felt about those products, still, as products, they did have a huge impact in what we use today, what we may use in the future, and just how we view things. I heard somebody say that Steve Jobs made it cool to own legal music, and I think that's so true. Excuse me, and so appropriate because back when online music downloading was popular, it was all about Napster and where you could get it for free and file sharing and everyone was basically downloading all this illegal music, and you were basically an idiot if you actually paid for music, because it was you can get it for free, but with iTunes, with the iPod, he made it cool to buy music online. Of course, that's just one minor way he's had an impact on the market, on society, and on the world. And so I am anxious to see just, what the world of technology is going to be like without Steve Jobs. Even if you view him in a negative light, that's even in a negative way, possibly, he had a huge impact on the market, though I happen to think it was in a positive way. But I'm anxious to see, what Apple is going to do now, or what the world is going to be like now that we've lost one of the great innovators. There's still innovators out there, but he was one of the greatest. And so, I just, felt it was necessary to pay my respects. I hadn't really said anything about it on Twitter, but I know a lot of people have. So you guys can comment about it if you want to, try to keep the comments nice. Again, no matter how you felt about him, he was still a person, he was still a human, and nobody deserves to die. So, Steve, we'll miss you, but you were a great guy, and you left your impact on the world, so I'm glad you invented everything that you did. So, in that same vein, we'll carry on with basically the products that he started, smartphones. So we'll just move right on, continuing with Apple. We'll start with the next big Apple news this week, which was the announcement of the iPhone 4S. Not a whole lot of difference, but the iPhone 4S. Up until the event was Tuesday, and up until Tuesday night, this was the biggest news of the week, and guaranteed to be what people talked about. So Steve kind of upstaged that, but anyway. So yeah, Apple did announce the iPhone 4S, and I just realized I know someone on YouTube one time commented. He said, if I hear her say, so anyway, one more time, I'm going to shoot myself. And I just thought it was funny that I do say that as a habit. But we'll continue with the iPhone 4S, which was announced by Apple. And if you haven't heard, I don't know, if you haven't heard about the improvements or what Apple did, I don't know if you live under a rock, but we'll just, do a quick recap. Basically, a lot of it is the same as the iPhone. Same display, same Retina display. Interestingly, not only is it not larger, it's also just exactly the same. Same Retina display, 960 by 640. The hardware design is also, the same as the iPhone 4. Now, Apple has added a dual-core processor, which, was basically expected. I mean, I think there were a lot of rumors surrounding this phone, and a lot of, just extraordinary rumors, and then a lot of kind of like really low-key rumors. And then, kind of just, there are also rumors in the middle of basically what we could count on Apple doing. And a dual-core processor was one of those things that we were, fairly certain Apple was going to do. Another one was increasing the camera megapixel count. It's now 8 megapixels. Apple did also do a lot of work within the camera. Megapixel count isn't always everything. And so they've also done a lot of things to improve the quality of the parts themselves, and so they've increased the aperture to let more light in. They've also added a 5th lens, and they have a new sensor to capture more light for sharper photos. So camera, huge improvement. Apple said that they wanted to build a camera that would rival point-and-shoot cameras, and so there's a lot of people that say that the iPhone 4 camera was the best camera on any smartphone on the market. Now, somebody mentioned in the comments on Ustream the Nokia N9. I don't know if you're talking about them in reference to what I'm talking about, but it does also remind me that the Nokia camera, the lens on devices probably like the N9, even though we don't have a lot of word on it yet, but previous Nokia devices, some people say that could rival the iPhone, but just for the sake of talking, we're just going to stick with the iPhone camera. So it's supposedly going to maybe rival point-and-shoot cameras. We'll have to see. And then it's a world device, CDMA, GSM. As far as GSM goes, it will be an HSPA Plus device, 14.4 megabits per second. So AT&T's version will be a 4G device. And then that's pretty much it. Not a whole lot of improvements. They did make, they are selling now a 64 gig model. You can get that for $400, which is ridiculous. So, not a whole lot of hardware updates. And a lot of people were extremely, extremely disappointed about this. And it's one of those things that everyone is going to talk about, that everyone was talking about before the announcement. It was, okay, iPhone has basically ruled the market for a long time. They've owned the game for several years. Android is starting to gain ground, but, the iPhone 4 still was just a little bit ahead of, all those devices that came out around the same time. But now it was almost like Android was not only catching up, but in a lot of ways surpassing Apple, especially the iPhone 4. Of course, it wasn't necessarily a fair comparison since the iPhone 4 was a year old. So, but for the time being, Android was surpassing the iPhone in terms of, technical specs, in just, different changes, a larger screen size, different things like that. And so people were wondering, how long can Apple hold on to just making these minor upgrades? The iPhone, this iPhone, surely they're going to, surely they're going to have some major upgrades just in order to keep up with Android, not to mention, owning the game again. Who knows if that's ever going to happen, but just to keep up with Android. So we were expecting, a new hardware design, a larger display, maybe a even higher res display, just all these different things. And so when none of that happened, it was not only disappointment as far as, what we were expecting, but also kind of surprise, as in like, wow, Apple, do you really think, this is all you're going to have to do in order to keep up with Android? So I think that's an interesting angle. Obviously, it's a developing angle because, we won't know until the sales numbers come out. But I mean, if you think about it, basically, the iPhone 4S, what it has going for it is that 8 megapixel camera, the fact that it has a dual core processor, and also that it is going to be marketed as a 4G device. At least that's what AT&T wants to do. Now, Apple, they've said that they don't want to get involved in the debate over what's true 4G or not. So they may not allow AT&T to market the iPhone 4S as a 4G device. We don't know. But basically what it has going for it is HSPA plus, the 8 megapixel camera, and that dual core processor. But if you think about that, there's tons of Android devices that have those three things and more, and not only more than those three things, but even in those three areas, there's a lot of Android devices that are better than that. Maybe in the camera department, you'll about break even depending on which phone you go with, but 4G, we've had 4G devices for a couple of years now. T-Mobile has 4G devices coming out with theoretical speeds of 42 megabits per second. Now, obviously, you're never going to reach that, but the idea is that you're going to get between 10 to 15 megabits per second down. Those are massive 4G speeds. Verizon has devices on their LTE network that are going to get similar speeds. So in terms of that, there's Android devices that far surpass the iPhone. And then you go back to a display. People wanted a larger display. Now, I think this was one of those areas where it was kind of mixed. There were some people who did want a larger display, and then there were some people who said, 3.5 inches is really fine. I don't really care. I think people wouldn't have complained if they had made it larger. And I'm not talking like 4.5 inch or even 4.3 inches. I think 4 inches, maybe like a 4-inch display, maybe that would be fine, or maybe just up it to 3.7 or 3.8. I mean, it sounds small, 3.5 to 3.7. It doesn't seem like that much, but whenever you get your hands on a couple of different devices with those different screen sizes, it really does make a difference. And I think now that you have the option and people have gotten their hands on devices with a 4-inch display, with a 4.3-inch display, and they're like, wow, this is so big. Web browsing is like, it's so amazing. And then you have other high-res displays, so you have a large display, plus it's Super AMOLED Plus, or, QHD, or whatever all these crazy things people are coming out with. And so it's almost like, okay, Apple, this might be good enough to continue to compete, but, even then, we're not really sure. And, worst case scenario is that this is not going to work out at all. And so, I was thinking about this, and I was, reading all of these editorials and, what people thought about it. We had an editorial posted by, who posted it? Just talking about if the iPhone 4S announcement was disappointing. Taylor gave his thoughts, and so, I was reading all of this. And, basically, I think that the way that someone else put it is that if you have an iPhone 4, it's not worth it to upgrade to the iPhone 4S. But if you don't have an iPhone, then yeah, the iPhone 4S is going to be like amazing. And basically, the conclusion that I came to is that it's all about perspective. I've heard people say that there is no reality, only perspective. The only reality is perspective. Just depending on how you view the world will shape what you think it is. What you think the world is like, depends on how you view it. So, coming at it from that angle, I think if your only option is an iPhone, whether it be because, you're an Apple fanboy, or if, you're just the average kind of, not so tech savvy consumer and you just know that everyone has an iPhone, whatever the case may be, if your only option is an iPhone, then yeah, the iPhone 4S is awesome. I mean, to have an improved 8 megapixel camera that captures 1080p HD video, to have a dual core processor, HSPA plus, Siri and all these, features that Apple has added. If iPhone is your only option, then the iPhone 4S is like the greatest thing that's ever happened. But I think if you're willing to look at other operating systems, then it's really not that impressive. And that's not a knock on Apple. obviously the iPhone has had a major impact in what smartphones are today. There would be no reason for Android devices, for manufacturers to push for dual-core processors if they weren't competing with Apple. If Apple... if Apple didn't have a single core processor, or if they didn't even mention it, then it wouldn't be like, okay, we need to make something better than the iPhone, so let's put a dual core processor in it. So, the iPhone still has had a lot of impact. So, not to knock on Apple, but I do think that, I don't know, maybe passing of the torch, if you want to put it that way. I think it's going to be difficult for Apple to still keep that, iron grip on the market. It's interesting that Taylor brought this out, that during the keynote address, whenever they were announcing the iPhone 4S and talking about the new features, Apple's stock dropped about, I think at the end of it was about 4%. And I think during it was kind of like around 3%, but once I read more reports on it after the event, it was kind of up to like 4%, which is kind of a big deal. I mean, it doesn't seem like a lot, but if you look at it in terms of the money, the amount of money that 4% represents, it's a lot. And so will Apple recover? Probably. I mean, it's, well within their ability to. And will the iPhone 4S still sell, will they still sell millions? Yes, of course, because it's still Apple. I just don't think that, I don't think it's going to be the best phone on the market. And that's kind of, a big deal, because that's kind of been a given for a long time. The iPhone was always just the best phone on the market. And it was like, well, maybe it's not now, but, when the new one comes out, it was like by default automatically the best phone on the market. And I don't think that's going to happen anymore. And it's disappointing. So those are my thoughts. But again, I'm going to go back to, it's still going to be a good phone. It's still going to be great. If somebody wants to buy it, it's still going to be an amazing phone. Siri, if you haven't seen the video for Siri, the voice, the personal assistant, as they're calling it, it's pretty awesome. Unfortunately, that feature is only coming to the iPhone 4S, which is kind of disappointing. But, so I still think it's going to be awesome. But no, it's definitely not what we were expecting, especially after, what was it? A year and a half? Almost a year and a half. And you're like, wow, Apple, it took you a year and a half for a dual-core processor, and that's it. You could have done that in 5 minutes. So I don't know. People have said they're too busy suing, but who knows? It's, and then they could come out with the iPhone 5 in June, and it'll be the most amazing thing ever, and you completely forget about what we're saying right now. So who knows? But we have tons of coverage on the iPhone 4S. We have polls. We wanted to know, are you guys going to buy the iPhone 4S? Interestingly, about 20% said, yes, absolutely, I am going to get the iPhone 4S. And then about 24% said they're kind of still on the fence. So kind of like 50-50. So if you take, half of that 24 and then you add it to the 20, you still got about, 30-40% of people that are going to buy the iPhone 4S, maybe a little less than that. So, obviously people don't care as, much as we thought they would, which is kind of surprising. I was surprised to see these poll results. You guys can go and check out the poll and, kind of give your thoughts on it. Usually whenever we do polls, and the reason why I was surprised, somebody asked me on Twitter, why was I surprised about the poll? And it's because following the site, keeping track of comments and numbers and poll results, we have a lot of Android fans. I don't know if it's just because Android is gaining in popularity, or if it's because Apple fans tend to, gravitate more towards Apple blogs. I don't know what it is, but we typically have more Android fans that, that respond to polls, that leave comments. And so when I saw the poll, I was like, yeah, it's definitely going to be 50%. No way, I'm not getting that thing. But it was actually very even between the yes, maybe, I don't know, absolutely not. It was actually really even. So I was surprised. I don't know. I mean, maybe the Steve Jobs, the effect that he has on people, what do they call it? The reality distortion fields, maybe that's still in effect. But we'll move on to, I know not everyone likes talking about iPhone Apple. So we'll move on to Android because, hey, what's better than iOS? Android. There you go. So Nexus Prime, which has been basically one of the biggest topics, and when I was getting my notes together for this, I was shocked that we hadn't talked about the Nexus Prime, I don't think, in this podcast. I can't remember mentioning it, which is weird because it's been but it's kind of just sort of crawled under the rug a little bit and just been kind of behind the scenes, and we know it's there, but we just get little bitty leaks here and there, so it was never really mentioned in a large way. But this week it was kaboom, we got a whole lot, just a slew of everything pouring in. So to start off with, Samsung posted their new unpacked teaser video, which we did talk about last week, about the Unpacked event and how we're more than likely going to see the Nexus phone. So we saw that teaser, which also had just a little glimpse of the phone. So Nexus Prime, I believe it's this. I'm going to show you guys. So this is all we saw. I said something big is coming, and then just sort of, in the shadows, this phone. And then people have taken this picture and photoshopped it and made the phone stand out a little bit more so we can get a clearer picture of what the phone is actually going to look like. But that's a different story. So, yeah, we saw this. All right, we know the event's coming. We're probably going to see the Nexus Prime. Everyone's ready for it, counting down, all this stuff. And then leading up to that, we got leaked specs for the Nexus Prime. Boy Genius Report, they have a trusted source who said it's going to have a 4.65-inch display with an HD resolution, 1280 by 720, Super AMOLED HD, 1.2 gigahertz TIO map processor, dual core. Did I say dual core? 5-megapixel camera, 1080p HD video capture, NFC, LTE, HSPA+, just the bomb phone. Basically what we thought the iPhone 5 was going to be, or the iPhone 4S. Just this awesome phone. We heard about this. We're even more excited. And then we saw pictures of the Nexus Prime. My voice is getting higher and higher as I go up. But then we saw pictures of the Nexus Prime, and I'll let you guys look at that. Galaxy Nexus. So we saw this picture, which also gave us a look at Ice Cream Sandwich. And then we got another one. Is it this one? No, that's the one I already showed. But anyway, so we got a couple of pictures leaked, and it was just so awesome. We were so excited. And then today, this just kaboom, just a letdown. Samsung has said that they've postponed the Nexus debut. They didn't say why. They just said, this is the statement. Samsung and Google decided to postpone the new product announcement at CTIA Fall. We agree that it is just not the right time to announce a new product. New date and venue will be shortly announced. So everyone's like, what? I mean, no, what? It's just a huge letdown. Obviously, if you're not an Android fan, then you don't care about this. But, and me, Android is one of my favorite operating systems, but personally, I don't use Android. But that's, again, a different topic. But, it is one of my favorite operating systems. And so, even though, my personal device isn't even an Android device, I was excited for this thing just because of to see this innovation in the market. I mean, you have to admit, even if you're not an Android fan, it would be awesome to have a phone like this on the market. So anyway, yeah, that was all they said. And so we're okay, so now we're dissecting this statement, which is what we do because we're losers like that. We spend hours dissecting statements. And so, okay, so they say it's just not the right time. What does that mean? It's not the right time. And so people were speculating, okay, it's because Steve Jobs passed away and maybe they just don't want to, they don't want it to look like they're taking advantage and, kicking Apple while they're down and wahaha, we have a better product. Maybe it's that. And we're like, nah, I don't, maybe it's probably not that. Maybe it's not finished. Maybe it's not done yet. But then that wouldn't really, it's not the right time to announce a new product. If it wasn't ready, then it would have just been maybe it's not the right time to announce this product, or we need to find a better time to announce this product. But they just said a new product, just like any product in general, it's not the right time to announce it. So You're like, what time? What's wrong with this time? It's CTIA. This is where everyone announces their new products. I mean, what's the problem with that? So I don't know. I mean, it could be the Steve Jobs thing. Out of respect, it's commendable. You know, I commend you, Google and Samsung. And then they say a new date and venue will be shortly announced. Now that leads me to believe that there's no hope we're going to see it at CTIA, because date and venue pretty much just leaves the event out. So it's not even going to be like within the next couple of weeks. At least that's what we're thinking. So very disappointing. I'm disappointed, but you know, it's not that big of a deal because we're going to see it eventually. I know it's a little bit longer that you'll have to wait, but we're going to see it eventually. In the meantime, because of all of these leaks that we got to see a glimpse at Ice Cream Sandwich. And we commented on this. I talked about this in last week's podcast, that we got a leaked video that was posted on Engadget, and it gave us a look at Ice Cream Sandwich, and it looked a lot like honeycomb. Like, it basically looked like honeycomb on a phone. And I was like, well, that makes sense. I personally said I didn't really like it that much. I thought it was a little too cold. I didn't really like it, but I thought it was great that Google was trying to make it look prettier. Well, these new screenshots and this new video, it's on Phone Dog if you want to see the video, but we also got some screenshots. Ice Cream Sandwich, it looks like they've updated it, and it looks really great. So here's, again, the picture that I showed you earlier. And you can see just the home screen, it looks different. That dock at the bottom, it looks really different. And it may be like a lot of subtle things, but I actually really like it. You know, if we go through here, and it kind of looks a little different. The font, again, you know, me, I'm big on design, so the font is different. I never liked that honeycomb font. The font for the clock is different. Here's another one of Ice Cream Sandwich. So, you know, you can see it has the elements of honeycomb, but to me, it just looks, how is it different? It just looks more elegant. You know, it still has the same, you know, Android, you know, feel to it, but it just looks like an elegant Android. And so I like this version better than the version that we saw last week. That's personal. I mean, everyone's going to be different, and it's just subtle differences. So, you know, it may not matter to you at all, but we did at least get those leaks. And then we got another leak of the Nexus Prime, its display, giving us, again, you know, just another recap on the resolution. It is, again, an HD resolution. What's interesting is that you can see on this display is that the typical Android buttons for back, home, and I'm guessing search or menu, they're actually on the screen, much like they are on Honeycomb, obviously, but they're still in the same place as the physical buttons are right now. So that was something that I was wondering, how are they going to implement that, because are they just going to be like little tiny buttons in the corner, or, you know, how are they going to do that since it's not on a 10-inch tablet? So they're basically in the same spot as the physical buttons are now, but they're now just touch sensitive on the display. So I don't know, to me it kind of defeats the purpose, because you're like, why don't you just have the buttons, but, you know, whatever. Anyway, so that's the Nexus Prime. I know you guys have been looking forward to it so much, and I'm excited about it. I've been asked, because like I said earlier, I don't use Android as my personal device. I use Windows Phone 7 just because, you know, I used Android for a couple of years, and I just wanted to try something new, just visually different. I just wanted to try something else. So somebody asked me if the Nexus Prime, if I would switch back to Android for the Nexus Prime, and the answer is probably not, because just not for any personal reason, but just logistics. The chances are that the Nexus Prime is only going to be on Verizon. We got that. We've heard that before, and then a leak to Boy Genius Report, their source said that it will be a Verizon exclusive. So I'm not on Verizon, so just, you know, logistically speaking, it wouldn't really make sense for me to, you know, terminate my contract, switch to Verizon, you know, pay all the money, and it just wouldn't make sense. So I may check it out, you know, I may get some hands-on time with it, but I probably won't switch. If something similar comes to the carrier that I'm on, you know, maybe I will. But I do like the look of ice cream sandwich. So, even though the Nexus Prime may not be an option, I'm sure that there's always going to be plenty of ice cream sandwich devices, so I may check them out. I mean, I don't know. Speaking of Windows Phone, let's move on to some Windows Phone news. We mentioned last week that Mango has started rolling out to Windows Phone devices. Mango is the code name for the first major update to Windows Phone. Windows Phone is version 7 of the operating system, and Mango is what is being called Windows Phone 7.5, or Mango is what 7.5 is being called. So it's obviously a huge improvement from, it's at least a half step to the next version. And it brings a lot of new features. Microsoft has said over 500 new features. I've tried to find a complete list of all of the new features, and I found one website that had I think 300 of them, and so I wanted to see all of them, but But anyway, but a lot of new features, and of course, we've talked about this before. Some of the new features that are coming, coming or that are here, depending on if you've gotten the update yet. Multitasking is the biggest one. More integration with live tiles. Live tiles was, well, it is basically one of the single most important features of Windows Phone, because it's the interface. It's what you see on the home screen, the live tiles. And for a long time they were very useful, and there was a lot of potential there, but they weren't being used to the extent that they could have been used, and therefore, for the most part, they were just tiles, and they weren't necessarily live tiles, even though they could have been. But now there's deeper integration with live tiles within apps. Now, obviously, this is up to third-party developers what they want to do with a live tile, but it's obviously been encouraged, and it's obviously being done more. And so that may sound like, what's the big deal, but it's pretty interesting. If you use a Windows Phone device, live tiles are awesome. And so, anytime you find a new feature that you can use as a live tile, you're like, wow, that's awesome. So, more live tile integration, and then other features like Local Scout, App Connect, and cards, I think they're calling it. It's pretty interesting, and I showed this to my husband, and he was totally not interested. But basically, I'm going to try to show you guys this on the screen, because this is probably one of the coolest features that I don't know if I'm ever going to use this feature, but it's pretty cool. So if you do a search for a movie, like say Moneyball, which is a movie, I saw it is pretty good. So I can do a search for Moneyball, and it will show me. You guys can't see that. Along with the web results, it'll also show you the local theaters in your area. So you can click on that section with the local theaters. Can you see this now? No. And then it'll take you to a card for that movie. And this isn't like an app or anything that has to open. It's just a card that, Windows Phone opens. And you can see show times for theaters in your area. It'll tell you, you have apps that will help you with this search and blah, blah, blah. So if you click on show times, you click on the theater that you want to see, then Local Scout will help you to find restaurants in the area. It'll help you to find, things to do, shopping. So it's, all this stuff you can basically plan your entire evening without having to, go all through all these apps and open different things and search and all this stuff. It's just, you do a search for the movie, and then boom, 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 boom. It's all right there. Boom. Anyway, I'm obviously excited about this because I use Windows Phone. So, to me, it's like something I'm going to use. Also, you have Twitter integration, which is new. Anyway, so all of these new features, you guys can read about them. The Mango update is rolling out now. I got my update. I've updated my phone, and some pretty cool features. So that's exciting, and it's newsworthy. It's been talked about. We also have some news on a Nokia Windows Phone device. We've heard about this ever since the beginning of time, really, but not really. But ever since they announced their partnership, we've been waiting for a year for Nokia Windows Phone devices. We finally got confirmation that they were going to come in Q4, which is now. This is Q4, and then Stephen Elope. It's not elope, because that would be dumb. Elope. That's how I'm going to pronounce it. He said that he confirmed that Windows Phone devices would be coming this quarter, and he didn't mention an exact date, but Reuters believes that we'll see them in October at Nokia World, which is kind of a given. We also got some details on a possible Nokia Windows Phone device known as the Sun, codename, I'm guessing. It's going to have a 3.7-inch AMOLED display, so pretty cool. But yeah, Mango is a big deal because, you know, it's like, you know, iOS, obviously one of the most popular, probably the most popular operating system on the market, and then Android is gaining ground, and Android has really added a lot to smartphones, and it's really forced Apple to add a lot. You know, things like the improved notification system with iOS, that might not have happened if Android wasn't such a big competitor. So, you know, Android has had a big impact on the market, and then iOS is obviously, you know, iOS. Everyone's, you know, everybody knows about Apple. But outside of that, there haven't really been a lot of other options. You know, we had WebOS, but just barely, and then that died. You know, Symbian, just like not really. So for a while, it was like there was this gap, and we needed something to fill it. And Windows Phone, it only has like 1% market share, but this Mango update, I think is really going to help it, because things like multitasking and just the other improvements that it brings, you know, being able to start a conversation on Facebook chat and then continue with a text message and it still is in the same thread. You know, the Twitter integration, live tiles, things like that. Plus the notification system is also great. It's really going to help Windows Phone, and I think to have more options is great. And it's one of those things that I've mentioned, that I've said before, that I've preached about. You know, even if you're an Android fanboy or an iOS fanboy, it's good to have options because competition drives innovation. And so, you know, Android and iOS are living proof of that. And I think that Windows Phone is living proof of that too, because of Android and iOS, Microsoft really had to change their approach to smartphones. And born from that was a great operating system. So this is a step in the right direction for us. You know, whether you like Windows Phone or not, like, that's fine. But just the fact that there is another option, you know, whatever it may be, it's a step in the right direction. So if you don't have Mango yet, I'm sorry, you can force the update. Let me tell you a story. My Mac died. This Mac is really old, for one thing. So yeah, it died on like Friday, I think, last Friday. No, it must have been Saturday. And I was like, wow, my Mac just died, and they cost like, you know, $1,100, and whoa, okay. So I was panicking. Anyway, so I was trying to update, because you can force the Mango update, and I was trying to do this, but unfortunately, the force process doesn't work for Macs. I mean, it does like for 2% of the people, but for the most part, it doesn't work. So I couldn't force the update. And so I was like, wow, this is just pathetic, Sydney. You're a blogger about cell phones, and you can't even update your phone. I felt very inadequate for a long time. And some of you are probably like, yeah, you are inadequate, but whatever. Anyway, but I finally got it. I'm excited now. And my Mac is okay, just in case you're wondering. The hard drive died. And so I went to this Apple store. It was funny because I was at the Apple store the day they announced the iPhone 4S. And I was like, how about that iPhone? It's kind of disappointing, right? And the guy's like, no, I beg to differ. And I was like, yeah, you would. But anyway, so I went to the Apple store, and he did all these tests, and he's like, yeah, you need a new hard drive. And I was like, how much is that? And he said, well, you know, we can do it for like whatever, but I would recommend going somewhere else because you can get it done a lot cheaper. And I was like, you know, I really appreciate that, because, you know, it's nice whenever Apple employees realize that, yes, we charge way too much for this stuff. So it's okay if you go somewhere else. So anyway, I got my hard drive replaced. Unfortunately, my other hard drive obviously died, so I couldn't get, it was all gone. All of my documents, pictures, photos, everything was gone. And I was like, that's okay. That's all right, because, you know, it's fine. I didn't have a lot of stuff. It was mostly work, videos, and documents, and those all get uploaded, so it's like no big deal. And then today, today I started preparing for the podcast and I was getting my notes together. And if you guys watch the podcast, you know that I have this cheat sheet that has specs for every single device, either on the market or rumored or coming out in 6 months. Like every single device, I have the specs for it. And like there's so many devices, it's like a 10-page document with like size 9 font. So size 9 font, 10-page document. You can imagine how long it took me to compile that, the research, the time, the number of phones, and it's gone. And when I realized that, I was just like, ugh. I mean, the one thing, anyway, so that's gone. So basically, the moral of that story is that, oh, well, for one thing, back up your documents, but two, I use that cheat sheet and the open Q&A because you guys ask me about these random obscure phones that I read a sentence about like a month ago, and then you want to know more about it. And the cheat sheet helped because I could just look it up, but now I can't do that. So if you ask me something and I don't know the answer, it's because I don't have my cheat sheet. But I'll Google it, or you can Google it, but I'll Google it and I'll try to find the answer. Moving on to some interesting news because, like, who wants to hear about my life? Anyway, I did a review on the HTC Rhyme. You can check that out. It's the woman phone. That, I don't know, is not for women, but it is, obviously, because it has a purse charm, and like, who has a purse? Women, exactly. You can check out that review. I talked about this whenever the phone was first announced. You know, there was a lot of people who were upset about it, because women, they were like, I don't need a phone made for me, and, you know, why is it blah, and all this stuff. And I was like, hey, you know, we have phones for people with rugged lifestyles. We have phones made for gaming. We have phones made for music listening. So, you know, why not a phone for women? I was like, whatever, it's fine. That being said, I wasn't expecting much out of it, and I was like, I don't really see what's so different about it besides the color. I mean, it looks the same. I got the phone, and I am a believer. Yeah, I'm a believer, but no, really, I'm a believer. And I can honestly say that I have genuinely enjoyed my time with the Rhyme. That rhymed. But I have genuinely enjoyed my time with the Rhyme, and it's been a great phone, and I would recommend it. Very few flaws. There are flaws. There are some things that kind of were like, but overall, it's a great phone. So if you like purple, whether you are a man or a woman, I would recommend the Rhyme. Charm. I don't know. Let's see. Sprint is updating their network to LTE, which is awesome. WiMAX was sort of like this random technology they decided to go with. I mean, it made sense at the time, but like a year later, it was like, why did you do that? So they're upgrading to LTE, and they said the rollout should be completed. Well, 250 million Americans should have LTE by 2013. So, and then they've said by that next year, they're going to release 15 LTE devices, whether it's like laptops, or probably not laptops, but data cards, tablets, and cell phones. So, yeah, that's a lot. I mean, that's a lot, you know? And it'll finally be true 4G. I mean, at least, you know, as close as we can get. There are people that argue that LTE 2 is true 4G, but, you know, I mean, we're like, at least, you know, we're not calling like HSPA plus, we're not saying that's true 4G, because it's obvious, like, okay, HSPA plus, and then the evolution from that is LTE. So how could you even, like, logic would tell you that HSPA plus isn't true 4G, but, you know, we call it 4G anyway, just because. So at least Sprint will have a more true 4G network than they do now. So if you're on Sprint, congratulations. It's unfortunate that the iPhone 4S is not a 4G device, at least not in terms of LTE. I mean, it's HSPA plus. But unfortunate, which is why, you know, more people are thinking that maybe this was just kind of like some small release and that we're going to see another one in the spring, which would totally go against everything we believe about Apple's release cycle. Because, you know, it was always in the summer, and now we're in the fall, and they're going to release one in the spring. It's just like, it doesn't make sense. So I think I think it's going to go back to summertime. They're going to just release them in the summertime. I think the iPhone 5 will probably be more of a true 4G device, but, you know, we'll have to wait and see. But that's pretty much it. That's all I have to cover, and I think I got all of my pictures. I got to show all of my pictures, which is good. What did you guys think of that new intro thing? Did you like it? It was kind of cool. Yeah, I liked it. Anyway, so let's move on to the open Q&A. I will be on Ustream. I will also be on Facebook, even though there's usually not anyone on Facebook. And this, okay. I was on Facebook, and you know, they upgraded like the messages. I don't know, the way you get messages or something. I never use Facebook, so they upgraded the way you get messages, and I was like, oh, that's cool, but I couldn't make the window go away. I kept clicking other places, and it was determined to tell me about messages. Anyway, yeah, so nice link on Facebook. I'm not sure what the point of that is. We usually don't allow links. I'm surprised that got allowed. Anyway, so on Ustream, is Virgin Mobile USA ing a new BlackBerry? I assume you mean getting a new BlackBerry. We, you know, and of course I don't have my cheat sheet, but from what I remember, we're not for certain that they're getting a new BlackBerry. Now, they got the BlackBerry Curve, the, you know, previous model, so, you know, we're thinking that eventually they will get the new Curve, but we haven't heard anything to verify that yet, so. And again, guys, if I'm wrong about any of this that I say, I apologize. Yeah, without my notes, it's like I have to just remember everything off the top of my head, and it's really difficult, so. Okay, I want to upgrade to a bigger display from my HTC Impulse. What should I get on at&t? To a bigger display on the Impulse? Wait, doesn't the Impulse have like a 4.5-inch display? Or am I thinking of something else? Hold that thought. You have the Galaxy S2, which is probably the best phone on at&t. So if you want to upgrade to anything, I would recommend going to that. The Impulse, the Huawei. Do you mean the? Okay. Anyway, yeah. The Infuse has a 4.5-inch display. Okay, I'm sorry. Yeah, if you want to upgrade to anything on at&t, I'd go with the Galaxy S2. That would be my best recommendation. What do you think about the Galaxy S2 White? White is awesome. I think it's you know, a great color. I would probably still go with black. I don't know. I mean, maybe, I don't know, I might go with white, but yeah, white is a good color. Does the Rhyme get hot when you use data or game on it, or just phones in general? Some phones do get warm. You know, it just depends on the phone. The Rhyme, I did notice that while I was in the media dock, because it comes with the media dock, you know, while I was in the media dock, it did get warm. But I mean, it was charging and I was playing music. So I think that was kind of expected. Do you think that Nokia N9 and HTC Amaze will come to the UK? Possibly. The N9 seems like it's going to be like a limited release. So it might. The HTC Amaze, I'm not sure. Wow, I am useless without my cheat sheet, aren't I? Everything's just like, I don't know. Okay. Got any news on Amazon buying WebOS Palm? I want it to happen. Yeah, we heard that rumor, and then people were talking about it and how it would be a good idea, but we don't have any updates on that. Is Aaron still using the Bold 9930? If he isn't, why did he stop? I'm not sure. You know, it was a 30-day challenge, so, you know, after 30 days, he could go back to whatever he wanted. But he has, like, 5 personal devices, so even if he was still using the Bold, he also has, like, an iPhone and a Droid. I think he has like a Droid 3 or something. Sydney, I'm obsessed with BlackBerry's keyboard, but everyone's getting an Android iPhone. I text a lot and type a lot. I use the internet all the time and talk on the phone a lot. That's it, really. So, okay. Thanks. You're welcome. So sometimes, but yeah, what's a boy to do? Well, you could get the torch or the torch. You could get the torch that has the slide out keyboard, or the torch that's just a virtual keyboard. I'm guessing you would probably like the torch with a slide out keyboard. You could do that. That'd probably be a good option. I want to work as phone dog when I'm 13. Okay. What do you think about the Samsung Galaxy Note stepping up from a phone like the Desire HD? What do I think of the Note stepping up from a phone? Like, you mean coming from a phone and going to the Note? I'm not sure. I think the Note, it's like, I don't think I would ever want a device that has a 5-inch display. But if you do, then great. Like, there's nothing, like, no one can ridicule you for having a phone with a large display. I think for me, the biggest determining factor is the guts, the processor, the display itself. Does it look good? And the Galaxy Note has great specs. So yeah, I mean, definitely it's going to be a great device. The only reason I've said that I don't think it's going to sell very well is just because not a lot of people want a device with a display that large, but there will be people that do, and it'll be great for them. When are you guys going to be reviewing the T-Mobile version of the Galaxy S2? As soon as we get it. We usually, it's up to the PR company. Either we ask the PR company or the PR company asks us to review a phone. And then they have to wait till they get one, till they have enough in stock. They have to ship it out, all that stuff. It's mostly on them as far as when we get it. But as soon as we get a phone, like FedEx drops it off and we turn on the camera and do an unboxing. Like, that's how it works. So as soon as we get it, that's when we'll do the unboxing. Okay, why is it that everyone is upping the processor but doing the opposite for battery life? When is Android going to realize a phone that can't get through a normal 12-hour day isn't acceptable? There's a lot of things that Android should probably realize isn't acceptable. Bad battery life and also fragmentation, but we talked about that last week. When? I don't know. I'm not sure. But I agree with you on that. I do agree on that. Do you think the Nokia will have the best Windows Phone devices? Nokia has some of the best hardware. I think HTC could rival them, but I think Nokia has some of the best hardware. As far as we know, Nokia isn't going to make any changes to Windows Phone 7, just like every other manufacturer can't make any changes. So, based on that, it will be just as good as every other Windows Phone device. It will probably just, be hardware. And then the camera. Nokia has great cameras. Do you think the Nexus Prime can take over the iPhone? Yes. Now that iMessage is coming, even more people are going to get the iPhone, and it's going to suck for the rest of us. Okay. You still have text messaging. I mean, it's not dead. Sydney, when you do reviews, could you cover the media player too, since you're a teen lifestyle editor, like interface, cover flow, and so whenever I do smartphone reviews, typically it's Android, and the music player is basically the same on every Android device. The manufacturer may make a few changes, but for the most part, it's the same. So we don't get deep into Android itself when we cover a phone, because we'll have, like, when Android first came out, or we do videos on Android, and then for the most part when we do a cell phone review, we just cover the UI. So unless there's major changes to things like the media player, we typically don't cover it, just because it would be the same thing for every video. Okay, Sydney, is a Samsung Stratosphere supposed to be a smartphone or a mid-range POS? It's a smartphone. Even mid-range smartphones are still smartphones. So yes, it's a smartphone. Okay, do you prefer vanilla Android or custom UIs like TouchWiz? I prefer custom UIs. TouchWiz is my favorite, since is probably my second favorite. What do you think about the LG Esteem? It's going to be a great phone. I don't particularly like LG's UI. I like certain elements of it, but then there's certain elements that I really just don't like. So, as far as a phone, it's going to be great. And in custom UI, that's, everybody has different preferences. But, personally, it's not one of my favorites. But yeah, I think it'll be a great phone, and especially for Metro PCS users. I'm I'm on Ustream. I want to check something. Okay. Sorry. Just wanted to make sure everything was working correctly. Okay. When will Verizon get good Windows Phone devices or phones? We should have a bunch of new Windows Phone devices this fall. So, we've heard of a couple coming to T-Mobile. We'll probably hear of some more coming to Sprint and Verizon. I love Sydney. You answered both of my questions. You're welcome. I just try to answer questions, obviously. Okay. Please answer T-Mobile Galaxy S2 or wait for the Prime unless the Prime is just for Verizon. The Prime is more than likely just for Verizon. We keep hearing that rumor, and, typically when you keep hearing something, it's generally true. So you can wait just to see, but it's probably just for Verizon, so I would just go for the Galaxy S2. I hate to spam, but why don't you guys have a mobile application of PhoneDog, or at least a mobile version? If you want to develop an app, then go for it and make it available. We do have a mobile version of the website. Somebody asked me this today, and I was like, this is so simple. It's im.phonedog.com, which is what every mobile site is. So anyway, yeah, we do have a mobile version of PhoneDog. Thanks, Sydney. You're a cool chick. Thanks. Do CDMA antennas drain more battery than GSM antennas? It seems like that, but CDMA radios have stronger signal. I should know the answer to that because I once did like a crash course in mobile technology, but I don't know the answer off the top of my head, so maybe somebody else can answer that. I apologize, but it's probably in here, just like way in the back, and I can't think of the answer. Use the mobile website every day. Awesome. When do you think Windows Phone will start supporting dual-core processors? I don't know, but it doesn't really need, honestly, Windows Phone doesn't need a dual-core processor. I'm sure it would help and I wouldn't complain, but I honestly don't think it needs a dual-core processor right now. The operating system in its current state wasn't built for a dual-core processor, so Microsoft would have to overhaul everything, and it's just not worth it considering it doesn't need it. So maybe, Windows, maybe the next version will, I'm not sure. Sydney should be an accessories reviewer. Thanks. Is there any news? The Motorola Zoom 2, I haven't seen any post news lately. We got a quick screenshot of Verizon's inventory system, and it mentioned a device that we're guessing is the Zoom 2. That doesn't tell us anything about it at all or when it's coming, but we, at least we know it probably still exists. My friend's curve on at&t would et 2 days, but my mind would get half a day. It would get. Ah, interesting. Do you think the iPhone needs a dual core? Probably not. The iPhone 4 is plenty fast. I think it needs a dual core processor to, keep up and to still sell. But, probably not. I think it's fine. Android needs a dual core processor because of the multitasking. There's constantly a million tasks running in the background, so it needs a dual core processor. Windows Phone and iOS, they don't really have that. Even though Windows Phone has multitasking and, app switching now, it's still not as intense as Android. So, yeah, Windows Phone, iPhone probably don't need a dual core processor. 2 minutes left. Yep, 2 minutes. Oh, let me check out Facebook since I've been neglecting it. What do you think about at&t wanting to brand the iPhone 4S as 4G? Well, yeah, of course they're going to want to because it's a huge selling point. Especially, that was one of the things people said, in order for Apple to keep up with the game, the iPhone 5 needs to be a 4G device. That was the bottom line. And so, obviously, at&t recognizes that too, and so in order to sell, yeah, they're going to want to market it as 4G. But it doesn't look like Apple's going to let them do that because of what I said earlier. Apple doesn't want to get involved in that debate over what's true 4G, which obviously says that they don't think HSPA Plus is true 4G. At least that's what I get. Sydney, should I get the Infuse 4G on at&t for $99 or fork over $199? I would fork over $199 for the Galaxy S2. Sydney, do you think the Motorola Atrix will get ice cream sandwich? Yeah, I think so. It's a new device. at&t said that all of their devices that came out this year... they said all of them will get 2.3. So, yeah, I think it will. It's new enough, and it's a hot device, so I mean, that's my guess. Don't quote me on it, but I would imagine it would. Would you recommend a Windows Phone 7 device or Android if I value app selection and a good media player? Well, app selection, obviously Android has a lot more than Windows Phone. I'll tell you, in using Windows Phone, I've never been looking for an app or looking for a specific type of app and couldn't find one that was worth using. So there may be less apps, but the quality is still, very good. That being said, Android still has more apps. Good media player. Android has a fine music player for transferring music. Easily you can use Double Twist. It's very simple. However, out of the box, with Windows Phone, you have Zune. It's right there. You can set it up easily. It's easy to download music. So, as far as getting the content and ease of use, I think Windows Phone would be better. However, in terms of like the music player itself, they're both even. Android has a fine music player. But yeah, and then again, Android has more apps. Okay. Oh, it's 5:01. Oh my gosh, I went overtime. Sorry, guys. Okay, so that's all we have for the show today. If you missed any of this show, I recorded it, and I will post the recording on YouTube. If you're watching the recording, thanks for watching. I guess that's it. If you want to ask me any other questions, if I missed one, you can send me a message on Twitter. My screen name is It's My Job to Know. And I will see you guys. I will not be here next week. Let me see. Tomorrow, this is the 7th. Yeah, I will not be here next week because I am going on vacation to... Well, I'm not going to tell you where. But anyway, I'm going on vacation, so I will not be here next week for the podcast. We may have Taylor do it. I don't know. That's up to Aaron. He's the boss. But I won't be here. And then I also won't be here for the Friday after that. I just realized that. So 2 Fridays in a row, I'll be gone. I will not be here. So maybe Taylor, he may do it. But anyway, I'll see you guys on the 28th. I'll be back on the 28th for the podcast. I'll be back before that. But for this podcast, again, it'll be on the 28th. Anyway, that's all. Thanks, guys, for watching. I'll see you guys later. Bye.